Hello, good morning, and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Good morning and welcome to the show. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, first of all, there's that of the appointment of INEC chairman by the president for another 5-year term. And don't forget, you still have the other names that were submitted to the National Assembly.
The National Commissioners.
Yeah, for the national commissioners and questions. Remember all the concerns that lots of people raised. But you know...
About just one person, though.
Yeah.
But then another person was also identified on that list by some other people.
But, you know, the appointment of the chairman, of course, you know that there's been a lot of focus on how do we improve from where we are. I remember when this current INEC chairman postponed the elections, this last general elections, at the time where people wondered, what's going on? He said that we needed to have a conversation about election management in the country. Now, that hasn't happened. He's been reappointed. And so does that mean that we're glossing over the challenges that we faced at that time? If we're not, how come we haven't addressed that holistically? And, well, the thing about that is that all of those suggestions and the bills that went to the president after he came through from National Assembly, when he returned them, saying there were certain things that, you know, he just didn't agree with. How many months on? What's going on with that particular bill?
What's even more troubling for me, Chamberlain, is that in the after the elections of 2019, we all identified serious issues with the process. Election management is one, election security is one, election adjudication is another, and a number of people have proposed we break the functions of INEC into some other responsibilities.
Yeah.
That's just in the realm of suggestion. Any paper to the effect? The INEC chairman himself at various fora had said, look, we need to have a sit down about the electoral process. The question then is, what's it going to take to have this conversation? We will always have elections within the 4 years. Is it as a result of the staggered elections that INEC is so focused on that we are not able to talk about these other bigger issues that will affect even the staggered elections? So the questions are still there. So another 5-year term, which will outlive and outlast the current president. But then what's the legacy that this current stock of INEC going to live for Nigeria when their tenure ends?
But the thing is, one thing we can say for sure is that elections, the next elections, people will not accept what they think they were going to accept yesterday. Things have got to change. There was a huge, and there still is and will be, conversation about us improving the last elections we did the last time out. Electronic voting.
So many people.
So that is going to be.
So many people are still speaking around the issue of the Electoral Act that, as you pointed out, was not signed by the president. Is that going to happen now? With this whole talk about the youths waking up and all of that, how much will they trust the system enough to say, you know what? I think the electoral process that we have now, the youths now saying, I think the electoral process that we have now is significant enough or sufficient enough to help us represent our interest in the scheme of things. Is that going to be? I think we need to stop playing the ostrich now and really face the real issues, because just as you said, we don't even know the kind of next general elections that we're going to be having. Now, crucially in all of this, and I know we're going there now, is that of security. During the elections, we always have all these issues, all kinds of papers come out about threat analysis of security in a number of states. What are we doing to ensure that that doesn't get any worse?
Well, those are some of the key things that the country really needs to address.
Absolutely.
Because electronic voting, we have to find a way to improve what we did last time. And nobody wants to keep voting for hours. From when you vote, they go for collation, and then it's in the dead of the night. They drive people away, they collect the results and announce it the day after. And you wonder, what is the big deal about some of these things?
You see,
we keep doing.
You just reminded me of what's happening in the U.S. now. About a good number of people, more than 50 million people, already voted before the day of the elections. And some people say that is exciting for them. I'm wondering how. Chamberlain, I'm suspecting this your chuckle.
Oh boy, it's just that, look, they can fool some people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. Even the way the media reports elections to the laws have got to change about that. Exit polling and all of those things, they just have to change the laws so that we are in touch with the time. Because if you, what do they say about that African proverb about a snake that refuses to shed its skin in order to grow bigger? Soon explodes and smears the landscape with gore.
Absolutely.
That certainly is not what we want. But then about security, do you guys remember this particular conference or briefing by the army?
Session. General Brote further alerted the PSOs, GOCs, and field commanders that the recent activities by unscrupulous elements have shown their desire to acquire arms and ammunition at all costs from security personnel. No less than 10 AK-47 rifles have been lost to this miscreant in the past 2 weeks across the country, with attendant loss of lives of personnel. He charged commanders to nip in the bud this emerging trend at all costs and directed them to warn their troops on internal security or on guard duties outside the barracks to be at maximum alert at all times and to also deal decisively with.
Now, what we want to talk about was when the army was talking about Photoshop, some of those images which you saw there, which wasn't real. But we'll tell you why we're going to go into it, because the dailies are reflecting the perspective of the army again, which they spoke about yesterday. So let's start with Vanguard newspaper. So we'll get to it as we progress. Take a look at Vanguard now. Governors, minister trade blames over looted palliatives. That was always going to happen. I haven't seen all of those scenarios. Palliatives distribution in Sokoto delayed at minister's request. Tambuwal. Remember yesterday the government said they were not all on the same page, Kogi governor. So they didn't agree with the modus operandi of some of these things. And now you're saying this one.
You know, Chimlin, I was actually I was shocked, but then not, overly, surprised. You remember virtually every governor that we have had on Sunrise Daily had, referenced the fact that not all governors agree on everything at the same time, especially when it's something that concerns the entirety of Nigeria. You remember the governor of Ondo State said exactly the same thing, that they all don't always agree. One wonders why.
Big questions there, really. So, Sokoto governor's claim untrue, says source in humanitarian ministry. Are they going to come up and speak up? They need to hear you and see you. No reason to halt palliatives under government. Kakovid explains delay in distribution of palliatives. ICPC to investigate alleged hoarding of palliatives. So these are all what you find right here. So, but the images there don't just look good. That's what it is. So all of these ones, you make of it what you will. And NSAS crisis, Lagos government invited us to intervene. That's from the army. So remember at the time they had said, okay, well, it wasn't the case. Give us time. We'll find out what transpired. Then there was the president's speech. Then many thought, wait a minute, so what's going on with this one?
I don't know what's going on, but I think something that needs to be made clear ab initio is when this issue started, the relevant authorities should just simply have come out and said, look, this is what happened. The problem has always been that of communication. Give people understanding of what happened. Preliminary information is information that you already have. Who called in the army? It is the Lagos State government, according to the military. Some people say it is the president that did. Will the Lagos State government be able to call in the army without the authority of the commander-in-chief of the armed forces? That's another question that people may also need to ask. Then there is the question of the what is it that the army can do in that kind of environment? Do they have the right to fire into the crowd or fire into the air? When they fire into the air, are there possibilities of a ricochet of the bullets on the people, what are the risks? What's the range of
if you
each
fire
bullet
into
out?
in the dead of the night, in the midst of a crowd like that, what are you thinking? What was the intention of firing in the air? What do you expect to happen?
If the intention is to scare, don't forget that a bullet can only go as far, and it will definitely come down at some point. Will it come down on the protesters?
Well, beyond the scare part too, if you fire into the air, you know that there will be a stampede. And people can die from that scenario. It's happened before.
Exactly. So many questions to ask, really.
But look at this right beside this other one. Presidency worries over police absence on streets. Okay, let me take that again. Presidency worries over police absence as street violence escalates. So this is the account of Vanguard here today.
Does that mean that the instruction of the Inspector General is not being carried out? You remember he gave that order that all authorities of the police should go on the street?
Several times now, and this is what you still see. So, pressure mounts on banks over consumer loans. So, look, lots of things will need reset. If they think that, well, of course, we've seen how certain structures are not holding up in terms of so many things. But also good to see this MPO's solidarity visit to TVC, the nation. Then you see Afenifere NEF disagree over alleged attack on northerners in South. So it's all going back and forth. Now, don't forget to check out the back page where they've got Eagles begin 2022 World Cup qualifiers May 2021. So football still playing its role right there.
The Nigerian Tribune is next and leads with NSAS. Reps warn as FG insists on regulation of social media. That story is on page 4. One wonders how that is going to happen. Well, there are a couple of quotes there. Lai Mohammed was quoted as saying, "We are sitting on a time bomb on this issue of fake news." He said, "Unfortunately, we have no national policy on social media, and we need one. When we went to China, we could not get Google, Facebook, and Instagram. You could not even see your email in China because they made sure it is censored and well-regulated." Honorable Owene says, "I want to appeal on this desire to shut down the social media that we should not overdo it because it will harm us. China is not a good example because it is a communist country. Nigeria has always been free. We are a democratic country." Well, two sides of the same issue, you want to say? The details are on the inside pages of the Nigerian Tribune, page 4 actually. Right above the nameplate, same issue of NSAS. How SARS detained me for 48 hours, removed my teeth, victim tells Lagos panel. That story is on page 16. Of course, Lagos Judicial Panel has started seating. Army says no massacre at Lekki, page 29 has the story, insists Lagos government called in military after 24-hour curfew was imposed. And on page 4, Buhari nominates Yakubu as INEC chairman. Find that on the inside pages right there. The back page has sports. Infantino tests positive for COVID-19, among other stories on the back page of the Nigerian Tribune today.
Well, take a look at News Direct. Lekki shooting. Lagos government invited us, but we didn't shoot protesters. That's from the Nigerian army. So that's why we're asking, look, if you listen to that time when they spoke about this, saying what they said about it at the time, and then you have this version, but then you also have several accounts of, you know, what transpired on the scene. So with this little perspective, you just wonder, piecing all of that together.
Well, let's just wait for the, account or the sitting of this Lagos panel on that one. After all, as we said, the scope of work has been expanded to include the Lekki Lekki incident. So that's right there.
There you go. That's News Direct this morning.
The Daily Times newspaper, sordid tales of SARS brutality emerge at Lagos Judicial Panel. The previous paper we quoted already identified one of those stories on page 2. And you'll find this one. The picture you see there is of a cab operator trying to put out a fire on his car. Protest. Lagos to hold officers who shot protesters accountable. Again, another angle to the same Page 2 of the paper has that one. NDDC funds positive may derail Buhari's mandate for Niger Delta, says Akpabio. That story is on page 4. I wonder what happens to the forensic audit that we've been talking about for a while. Fuel scarcity, more woes for Nigerians as fuel scarcity returns. That story is on page 5 of the paper this morning. The editorial is on J.P. Clark, Becker Demo.
Okay, well, take a look at Daily Trust. Hoodlums retreat in states. Their soldiers in Abuja loot NYSC camp, stores. Lagos counts losses. 6 policemen, 10 civilians killed. We'll deal with miscreants. That's from the army officer. Ascribed to him, actually. So, Lekki, Sanwo-Olu asked for deployment of soldiers. That's from the army. So,
that's what all the papers are saying about that one.
And then you just look at this and you feel, goodness me. And then, they equally do have few scarcity surfaces in Abuja. I think there was a statement from the NNPC as well, in terms of not having supplies for a long time. So what informs this now will be another major question. 22 years after, Yakubu breaks second-term jinx at INEC. So we equally need to have that conversation about what to do. How do they plan to improve subsequent elections? Because it certainly cannot be business as usual from what we saw previously. So they just need to ensure that the Electoral Act has to be amended.
The Leadership newspaper today is still talking about NSAS. Hoodlums take looting beyond warehouses. The story is on page 4. NYSC camp, customs, VIO offices vandalized. Mattresses, bikes, computers, kits, rice, others carted away. ICPC goes after sources of stashed palliatives as Kakovid appeals for calm. Sheath your swords, embrace dialogue, FG urges youths. Mismanagement by past administrations responsible for current unrest, according to Kogi governor. Be patient with government, Etsu Nupe urges youths. NPAN says solidarity visit to nation newspapers, NPAS pays solidarity visit to nation newspapers TVC. Destruction in Lagos too much for states to bear, says Southwest Senate caucus. That story you will find on page 4. Of course, that story is also right there on the front page. INEC chair Mahmoud Yakubu gets second term. And a number of other stories right under that picture. One of them, Survival Fund, payment of 30,000 naira grants to 333,000 artisans kicks off. That's right there on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. The criteria for the selection is also something that I'm sure a number of people would want to understand. That story you'll find on page 10 of Leadership today.
Okay, so the Guardian is next. Unemployment spikes as manufacturing outlook dims. Experts predict 50% unemployment rates rise. That will be more crisis, I tell you, because given the already existing figure, there's a huge scare. And then you have manufacturers laments looted warehouses. Expect longer recession, economist warns. So you just wonder, so where do we go from here at the moment? So look, oh boy, what a scenario they've got playing out here. So, and you wonder, you know, all of those figures that we do have in terms of data for development and planning, and how do they approach things now? So seeing, you know, those figures. Remember at the time we discussed the World Poverty Rate Clock and how people related with it, or how they were, what kind of actions do we plan to take about that? All of the previous ones notwithstanding. But of course, you have people who just didn't take all of those data seriously. But now, you wonder what they think.
Well, what they think would be immaterial compared to the realities that people have to contend with. Part of the question that we've raised over and over again with some of our guests is, what does it portend? What's the meaning? How do they relate with the fact that people are breaking into different places just to steal, just because they want a daily bread, just because they want to feed, for a day?
Yeah, that's why if the people in question are those who are to make those policies, what they think will be important in that regard.
Yeah,
they will need to approach these things differently, because it has shown that the way we've been doing things hasn't yielded the kind of results that clearly what's going to be good enough. Mm-hmm. So if they don't see those in that light, you just wonder.
Well, we had that conversation with the NSLS ETF woman in Lagos yesterday, and they were talking about trying to help some people to make sure that they remain in employment. That's a good thing, one would say, but then that's just Lagos. How about so many other states that are having the same measure of challenge? Unemployment is not just, it's a national issue, and unemployment and poverty seem to be sine qua non right here now. So we need to give a lot more attention. Just as you said, and I believe that the authorities know this, we can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result.
And then, nothing wrong with sounding like a broken record. What the states bring to the table. So, because, yes, we know people live in those states.
Absolutely.
So, if those policies of theirs are not properly fashioned out in terms of you address the needs of the people, this is how are you going to manage all the sea of heads? Because that is a clear picture for you. No matter what it is that they've been doing. That's a clear picture for everybody.
If you're looking for evidence of the high rate of poverty in each state, it's right there in your face. Well, the Kogi governor said yesterday that it's not something that's only about Nigeria. Agreed. But this is Nigeria. That's the where we have our own challenge. So
then they have this at the bottom strip here. National carrier will take off 2021, says FG. Project accommodated in 78.96 billion naira aviation capital budget. Let's run national carrier, not government airline, says Ojikutu. So again, remember we say that, look, all of these things, the national carrier is what is on the burner for them now in that sector.
Well, the national carrier, I think I'll align, and a number of people might also, given our history of running national carriers, how will it be run would be the question. We know what happened with the Nigeria Airways just within 20 years of its existence, or non-existence. How will this one be sustained? Starting the thing is good. Sustaining it, that's the issue.
I remember government also said 10 new airports are coming soon. 10 of them. And you thought, wait a minute, if 10 new airports are coming, of course people will ask, the ones we've got, are you telling me that that's the best standard we could have, we could ever achieve from the airports that we have? And they were talking about concessioning all those airports. And then 10 new ones are coming.
You don't even, should I just give you an idea of the extent, the severity of what you've just talked about now? At the time that the Murtala Mohammed Airport was designed, it was designed for a much more limited number than it is carrying now. It's carrying passengers on a daily in the millions now.
We didn't even complete all the phases of building
at the time
of the airport. Even till date.
Okay. See.
We haven't completed it.
So people have talked about the fact that we need to expand the capacity of the international airport that we have in Lagos, which is perhaps the busiest of them. And of course, we have one in Abuja. How strong are these? I don't know. Maybe government has some information that we don't have. What do you think?
Well. I think the results out there, they should measure whatever policies they have or they've ever put in place or they're planning to put in place with what they see playing out there. I think that's a true picture. Or that will help them in whatever else they are planning. So that is it with a look at some of the dailies here this morning. But we will be back in just a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Well, joining us now to talk about how all of these things are playing out, Professor Tunde Adeniran, OFR, former Minister of Education and former Nigerian ambassador to Germany. He's also a professor of political science. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, haven't seen how...
Chamberlain.
Yes, haven't seen how all of these things are playing out. Well, definitely you have kept tabs on the events as they unfolded. What concerns do you have?
I have very, very serious concerns because the NSAS has come more or less as an elastic metaphor for so much that have been wrong in our system, in our society. It has come for us as a nation and as a people to bear part of the wages of the sins of commission and omission that we have had in the past. What is worrisome, which has deepened my concern, is not because it has come and has happened, but because of part of the reaction. Because it has seen, through it, we have been able to see the manifestation of some of the worst instincts in us as a people, as a nation. But the reactions to it have more or less made one to wonder whether we will ever learn. Because it has happened, it is terrible, but our reaction to it, I believe we should really identify the real causes to be able to solve the problem. Looking ahead, it is a lesson for the future. But the reactions have shown that people have been rationalizing so many things. We've been attributing certain things to it. Yes, it is a result of frustration. Yes, it has been caused over the years by certain factors, certain things that were done, and some things that were not undone. But the real fundamental causes, we have been parrying over it. People talk about, oh yes, now give them palliatives when they have the palliatives that will solve the problem. You give palliatives. What type of palliatives? Those palliatives, within days, they be exhausted. But there are more fundamental palliatives that we have avoided over the years. What we are facing, the crisis that we are facing in this country, is an ideological one. I have said it over and over, that when we have, for instance, take the way the demonstrations went, you will feel proud that Nigerian youths are educated enough, they know what they wanted, they know how to organize themselves, and their future, that the future of this country could be guaranteed. But at the same time, you see how it ended, hijacked, and that is why we keep saying that the people, when you educate some people either in Port Harcourt or in Onitsha or Zaria or wherever, those who left uneducated either in Lokoja, in Makurdi, wherever, those people will become stumbling blocks. They are going to be sources of danger to those that will give education. The real issue is this. This country, the social capital investment, the social investment has been avoided. If we do not educate our people, make education compulsory and, of course, free up to the secondary level, we are wasting our time. And not just the type of education, ordinary education, education that will train them to be very good citizens, to be able to equip themselves, to know the values of life, the values of patriotism, and the values of their self-worth as individuals. Indeed, we've seen so many things that have happened. Now, when we reduce them for the fundamentals, take them one by one, we will realize that to many of those who hijacked the demonstrations, life has meant nothing to them. Individuals they see on the road are just figures. The properties that are being burnt mean nothing to them. They do not see them as their own property. They do not identify. And the brothers that they face, the sisters that they face, and so forth, and do maximum harm, do not mean anything to them. Because the psyche, we have become a nation that is so much against itself. The wickedness is unheard of, is unimaginable. But you cannot just now rationalize this, and of course some people even made efforts as trying to ethnicize or to religionize and so on. These are not the way to solve it. We have to go back to the fundamentals and make sure that indeed we are in trouble in this country. And unless we solve these problems, we are going nowhere. Many have argued that, okay, oh yes, the youths, we need to give them opportunity to serve and so forth. Go back to the First Republic. You see that during the First Republic, it all started, you have the Enahoros, you have the Umbus and so on. They are in their 20s when they were in service, when they were in government, when they were in leadership positions. You go to the Second Republic, Patutomi, Abubakar, Fari, and so many others, you can identify them who are in their early 30s and so forth, holding key positions. And of course, up to the recent time, the present regime, the present republic, you see that you still have quite a number of youth that are there. That is not the issue. There are more fundamental issues. You can take some examples. Rotimi Amici, at 33, was Speaker of the Rivers State Assembly. At 41, he was governor. You look at some others. Bankole, at 37, he was Speaker of the Federal House of Representatives. That is not the issue. We need to have as many of our youth, young people, we have to have women, we have to have the physically handicapped in government, in leadership positions. But the fundamentals are there. When people are there, what are they going to do? You cannot put something on nothing. The fundamentals have to be revisited. Our problem in this country is an ideological one, and we really have to tackle this frontally before we can get anywhere.
Well, Prof, you spoke about some reactions to all of this that is happening, and to you, they seem to be pointing in certain ways. It's not new. Every time we have an issue like this, in the First Republic, you mentioned this, the reactions to the Second Republic, reactions to the 1993 annulment of the elections, reactions to 2012, complaints and stuff like that. There are always reactions. But this specific one, what does this reaction say to you about our existential challenges?
Well, the reactions have more or less shown me that we have serious problems, very serious problems, because when people are trying to react on the basis of, scrapping the surface, we need to go to what I regard as the fundamentals. In other words, when you see a situation like we are facing now, and you try to explain it by blaming it on some political leaders, and one party here, one party there, and so forth, that is not the real thing. I expected that immediately these things were happening, we will have heard the political class coming together with strong groups, looking comprehensively. It is good now we are having commissions of inquiry. I hope these commissions will be wide-ranging enough, and they will expose everything. Nothing will be hidden. They bring out everything back to decades, and of course, SARS-related issues and other issues that are relevant to what caused the present problem. But religious leaders, traditional rulers, all various groups ought to have had meetings, groups, to really look into it. How do we tackle this across lines? This is not a partisan issue. It is not issues that you say is based either on religion or ethnicity and so forth. That is why I've been very worried about the various reactions. And the reactions are not genuine enough. Some are just parrying the thing. Okay, now, they are raising issues about this. Now, what do we do? Some issues, temporary measures. There are certain issues that have to be handled temporarily, quite all right. Yes, immediate solutions, but then the long-term solutions are even more important, more fundamentals. It goes back to the basics. In other words, there are certain things that ought to have been done. Right now, I have been worried by the fact that not many people, just only a handful of people have been able to refer to the fact that of the various seminars, the workshops, and conferences that we have had in the past, take, for instance, the 2014 confab. There are certain recommendations made by great Nigerians, eminent Nigerians. They sat for months thinking, coming up with some solutions. Some of these things ought to have been implemented as executive orders. Some of them, of course, will have been packaged and taken to the National Assembly for solution, while some could be subject to further review. But we have left undone some of the things that we ought to have done. And the reactions are still not satisfactory. We need to wake up. The wake-up call that it represents is a very serious one. And this country, as we are now, it is as if we are still putting fire on our roofs. We need to really address those issues before we can say, yes, indeed, we are getting it right. And everybody, we shouldn't push it and say, look, it is the government, it is Buhari, it is that, and so forth. Down to the grassroots, the leaderships, at the national level, state level, local government level, and the rest of us, as individual Nigerians, we have a very serious role to play in this matter. It is our future. It is the future of our children and our grandchildren. And it is the future of our nation. What happened in the past few days, in the past 2 weeks, when we look back and see these things, we feel ashamed. Those abroad are wondering, is this the same Nigeria that they thought would be the saviors of Africa, champions of the black race? We've let them down. We can still wake up. Time is of the essence, and we should begin to act now.
Well, Prof, I'd like you to, expatiate on what you talked about when you say that the fundamental problems are there that we are not giving attention to. Because, you're not the only one that is seeing a problem that will get worse if we do not address it frontally. Ambassador John Campbell has a blog that he featured a guest columnist, Dr. Richard Joseph, who said that Nigeria is confronting what he called existential challenges. Now, you have also talked about fundamental problems that we need to address. What are these fundamental problems? And do you think the authorities today and in the past are unaware of these challenges and consequently just, flowing along?
Well, I will cite just two examples. You see, we have been living in denial, which is most unfortunate. The problems are there and they will never go away. Some believe that because we have some inadequacies, people are being marginalized and so forth, and then the solution is this, to their tents. You have seen so many people saying, oh, let's have this republic, let's have this, break up the country, and all that. That is not the solution. That is not the problem. The problem is very structural, the structural deformity which is, ailing us in this country. What we need to do, which we ought to have done, that could still be done, is to ensure that we have a type of structure, a framework that will make it possible for individuals as well as entities, nationalities, to actualize their potentials, to live in brotherhood, to live in an environment in which you do not, everybody will see the other as everybody's, each brother, our brothers keeper.
Pardon me, Prof, just one moment. There was something that you said.
What you are...
Prof, pardon me.
Yes.
There's something that you said that I think is very important that people understand. You said we have some structural deformities. Are they new? Yes. And what are these structural deformities that need to be addressed, and by whom?
That's why I kept saying that, look, when they've been there, they are not new, but because we've been evading them, we've been running away from them, and we think they will go away, they will never go away.
What are these structural deformities?
A system in which, yes, when you have a system in which, now you have, let's take two simple examples. You have a governor in one state you have another one in another zone and all that and so forth. You believe that they have to be earning the same salary. Even the institutions that are existing. You have the vice chancellors of some universities and some others. You unify the structure. You do not give room for some differences in revenue generation, in some capacity to be able to carry some of those weights and so on. And then you expect that people who are in some areas, take for instance, people in the riverine areas and people in some other parts of the country, what you will require to develop will be based on some of the challenges that those people face. And when you also encourage a situation in which people have to appreciate the fact that, okay, what you bring to the table, what you are able to generate will enable you to develop, not just at your own pace, to the taste that you want. Those others too will be challenged to do the same thing. This is one country that I know in the world has no rival in terms of human and natural resources. God bless us so much. And maybe it is part of the blessings that we have in essence that is making us to misbehave. But we can utilize all this. There is no area that is not blessed. We can have a rearrangement, a type of arrangement that will make it possible. Recently, when President Buhari did something, it was part of what we have been talking about by saying that, look, local government should have their resources directly to them. The judiciary should be independent and so forth. This is just starting. These are little bits of what we've been talking about. But more fundamentally, it's not necessary for goodness sake. For states, before they can have what they call allocation, they have to come to the federal center. They are not being encouraged, being inspired to be productive. It should be done in such a way that resources generated, in other words, what you have in the federation, what you have at the list. The list, you have the supplementary list. There are two lists. The one that covers all of us as a nation, the one that is the list that only the states, the federal government handle the exclusive list. The other list, the states, okay, part of what they can key into. But the exclusive list, for goodness sake, why do we have so many things congested in that exclusive list? It should be democratized. We are not running a unitary system, and these things ought to have been looked into. The other example that I would like to state is this. We saw the way the legislative houses have been run. There is nothing wrong in State A or State B going its own way, the way it believes it has to run. If, for instance, what your state can afford does not go beyond certain levels, you do not go beyond it. You do not say because, some of these states are doing this, then you want to do it. And that is why our labor unionists, we have to go back to the drawing board and really think. It is good, solidarity, to try to do things together and so forth. But what do we profit as a nation when, because certain things are not going right, in somewhere, say, in Cross River, and then things have to be granted in Ogun State. Things are not going right in a place like, say, either in Ekiti State or in Kogi State, and people in Kaduna State or Borno State have to suffer for it. No nation is run on that premise, and we are not running a unitary system. It should not be so. These are the issues that we believe ought to be looked into. And I believe the starting point is to go to that 2014 confab.
All right, Prof. When we return, we'll take a look at what solutions, what further things should we be doing to get solutions. And then we'll highlight some reports as well, which was published earlier this year. Join us again. Welcome back. Well, Prof, there was a report that was published by a global risk firm in July this year, and it was talking about the economic impacts of COVID-19, which was going to be like a tinderbox that would drive protests, they described that as a perfect storm in many developing countries. Nigeria was one of those countries, South Africa, Algeria, Ethiopia, Congo. They listed several other countries. And then they said this was going to be in the second quarter of 2020, but that this could last for 3 years. This was as far back as in July this year, so they did all that analysis and put the report out there. Now, they equally said that this was going to inflame existing or pre-existing social inequalities, rights issues, and they were all there. So you'd have thought, these reports were out there, we should have seen this coming, even before this particular report. But you did talk about how we're responding to these things. You raised concerns about all of those. Now, given those responses that you've seen, do you get any indication that we actually do understand the problem and that we're doing something or we will do something to address them?
Well, my worry remains that our reactions, you see, COVID that you referred to earlier on, has always come, is an equal opportunity pandemic, which will have made us to do two things: address the issues of inadequacy of our medical facilities in our country, more research to be able to cope with these things, while also dealing with the immediate challenges posed. But generally, linking this up with the reaction to the existing crisis that we have on our hand, I believe that we have to be talking about solutions. And talking about solutions, the reactions make one sad in the sense that the political class is looking at it, what can my party gain out of this situation? Thinking about 2023, how do I undo my opponent and all that? That is wrong. We are not going to get anywhere. We should be looking ahead. For instance, I made reference to this issue of the structural imbalance and some of the things that have to be done. Earlier on, when I was also referring to the exclusive list and also the concurrent list, these are things to be looked into. Part of it, how do we solve this problem? I believe that going ahead, we have to look at it from at least three angles. One, at the governmental level, the executive level, what can be done to solve this problem? The fundamental issue is there, the ideological issue that I keep referring to. But for now, okay, the executive should be able to identify certain things that will have to be done. That list is there that can be implemented through executive orders. At the legislative level, the legislature should be able to look critically. What can we do with this crisis on our hand as Nigerians, as leaders, as patriots, to solve this problem now and in the future? And of course, at the individual levels, various organizations, societies, individuals should look at this. This may not have affected some people, some individuals, but at least it has affected so many people that we know. And it has affected our nation, and the future is in jeopardy. What was predicted in that report of July 2020, many of us saw it coming, and even right now, there are worse scenarios which we can only prevent from happening if we take the appropriate action. And by taking action is to look at these things fundamentally, the very root of this. We have left undone what ought to have been done. The youth is there in their millions, and no immediate palliative will solve the problem on a permanent basis. Yes, something should be done immediately. More fundamentally, certain things ought to be done beyond the visible benefits, merely distributing certain temporary palliatives and so forth. Things that will keep them busy, engaged. And between that period, between now and then, the temporary measures can be in place. But then we think, how do we get these youth to be employable? How do we get them to appreciate the fact that human life is worth of it, is worthy of protection? will not be dispensed of anyhow. How do we get them to appreciate the fact that the properties that have been bought and so forth belong to them? Because of the way governance have been over the decades, people do not identify with some of those. In fact, the empathy for fellow human beings, for fellow Nigerians, have not been there the way it ought to have been there, simply because of the way the orientation had gone. We have not been able to inculcate in them that fundamental, the basics, the values. What do we now value are material things. We have become a very materialistic nation. We are not a nation that are thinking, and we should be thinking as a nation. We should be doing things that we ought to be doing, so that we know we are building the future. We are building humanity. We should center whatever we are doing around the human personality and the selfish propensities of our leaders. People now see positions as where you go to, strengthen yourself, empower yourself, materially.
Well, Prof, yeah,
let
me...
in a sense, you're actually destroying yourself. You are destroying the system.
Let me bring in, we've since been joined by...
We have to go back to those.
All right, bro, pardon me. We need to bring in retired AIG Wilson Alegu. He's since joined us. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, that report I referenced did say that it was going to inflame existing grievances. So for those who are thinking it's about 5 for 5, they have another thing coming. But in the dailies this morning, they did indicate that the presidency is worried about the continued absence of police on the streets as some of these things escalated. This is in spite of the IGP's not one, not twice, several directives that they need to get back on the streets and reclaim the spaces. What do you think is going on?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. We have, first of all, I think the Inspector General of Police and his management team, in this circumstance, are doing their best. But there's a lot. You understand that the deployment by the police have lost personnel, materials, including police stations. Notwithstanding, the police is doing everything within its power to address some of these challenges. But you will agree with me that these are no small issues. I recall yesterday I was on the line with the Commissioner of Police FCT, Balachi Roma. And while we were speaking, he had to go off the line to address to several fronts where they were having crisis. Lugbe, Idu, and a host of other places. I think from the beginning, there were issues, of course, when the end SARS protest started. But along the line, I think the police, following the directive of the Inspector General of Police, tried to regain itself after those attacks in Lagos and other places. But I can't say, all I can say is the police is fighting on many fronts, trying to restore law and order. You will agree with me that there is almost a total breakdown of law and order. And it's not going to be like a tap. You just switch on the tap, the water comes, and you just switch off the tap, the water stops.
So what does it require?
Space.
What does it require to do that?
It requires the police that I know has an operations order in place to address some of these concerns. They look at some of the flashpoints, possible places that you could have this kind of flare-ups. And what they are doing There are arrests have been made. And I think yesterday some suspects that were arrested that were engaged in looting and other criminal activities were apprehended. So I want to say that the police is responding. It could be more robust, though. Okay. But I think from what I gather, speaking to one or two commissioners of police, there is a lot on their hands. And they are deploying the police mobile force, the conventional units. But you will agree with me that conventional policing in this type of instance is quite difficult. But let me tell you one thing. I think we should, in addition to law enforcement action, I think we need to also do, maybe talk about communication with the youths, with the public. And in doing that, the police, supported by other organizations, will do this.
Okay.
Because
well, Mr. Anogu, just one moment. Let me ask you something, because there seems to be a background. Just one moment. There seems to be a background to this that we may be missing out on. 4 times in 4 years, the IG have banned or asked that SARS men be reformed, be reorganized, and all of that. 4 times. And 4 times it didn't happen until this last time, when they had to be disbanded. Now, the SARS were under certain levels of authority before eventually the IG said, under my direct authority, with an AIG right there in Abuja. What happened to that chain of command that did not obey the order of the IG then, and even the current IG, the first time and the second time that he prescribed or asked that SARS be reorganized? That didn't happen. That you think if the IG just speaks now, when you say that the youth should be educated about the functions of the police, that the youths or anyone in Nigeria will even believe that it's going to happen, because it's happened before that the police have flouted the order of the IG.
Yeah, let me say something. Indeed, there were instances that SARS, there were attempts to disband and proscribe SARS. But what's my appeal to the public, and the youth in particular, that SARS is gone for good, and judicial panels of inquiry are sitting in the various states to address the grievances of youths and other Nigerians that have complaints.
Mr. Anogu, I'm sorry, it doesn't seem like you are really answering my question. Just one moment. You're not answering my question.
No, I'm coming. I'm coming to your point.
Okay, please go ahead.
So, what I appeal is for the public to have confidence in the Director for the Inspection of Police and the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that SARS has been disbanded. Let me tell you, give you a little background. SARS is just an investigation unit. Unfortunately, some of their activities went overboard. That's not a lie. That's not a lie. But the point is this. You are still going to be dealing with violent crimes. Crimes, armed robbery, kidnapping, banditry, and the rest of them. And so, the structure of the police, there is, when they are talking about reformation of the police, is going to be a kind of altering some of the present arrangement to place a structure that will address the concerns of Nigerians. And when you have an investigation unit, even before SARS came to be in 1992 or even 84, the traditional CID has a section on dealing with anti-robbery. It was not special anti-robbery, because you have anti-fraud, anti-human trafficking, and the rest of them. Unfortunately, because of violent crimes, SARS assumed a prominent position. But the point I'm trying to say is to assuage the grievances of the public that SARS has been disbanded and SARS will not come back. And that the Nigeria police will, continue to comply with international best practices. respect for human rights. Because in dealing with the issues like this, you talk about the structure. We have had issues, the training schools, because everything that is happening, fundamentally, I believe, is from training. Because if you go to Enugu Police
Mr. Noligo, just one moment, Mr. Noligo, just one moment.
You know that it's not...
Can you just... Why was the IGP's orders so many times disregarded by men whose job is to obey orders?
The question, my answer to that is that no police officer of any rank from constable to DIG can disobey the Inspector General of Police without consequences.
So what was the consequence those 4 times? Just one moment, because we need to visit the past to ensure that it doesn't repeat itself. That's the mistake we have made over time. Now, it has happened. SARS has been disbanded. SWAT is coming up. What's the assurance we have that SWAT will not become SARS, and then there will be another call for end SWAT? So what has been done to those people who flouted the orders of various levels of authority in the hierarchy of the police over the years? What should be done to them to ensure that this does not happen again?
My simple answer to that is, my understanding and what in the conferences I've attended with the Inspector General of Police, I know that SARS has been reorganized. A commissioner of police deployed to coordinate activities of SARS. What I understand is that SARS initially were removed from state commands and put under the direct command of a commissioner of police in the force headquarters to coordinate activities. When that was seen not to be producing effect, they were again sent back that the commissioners of police in commands should assume responsibility of supervision and direction of SARS. But that in the present circumstance, where the IG and the presidency has said that SARS has been disbanded, such a clear-cut directive, in my opinion, has just been issued. But what has been happening has been reorganization of SARS. Bring them from state. Okay, now we are one commissioner of police in Abuja to coordinate them, or commissioners of police in states to command them. But in the present, and then again, a uniform that you don't go, and one uniform was designed for them to wear, and there were issues like that. But a clear statement that we are the police is doing away with SARS, I think that pronouncement has just been made in clear terms.
Let me jump in, Mr. Noligo.
I don't see any...
Yeah, just hang on a minute. Moving forward now, people want change. 2 things that we've noticed is that, look, the senior police officers who are in the offices, well behaved. But the people, the policemen that people meet on a daily basis on the streets, there are huge question marks about how a lot of them conduct themselves. Can there be the kind of change that people expect, given that the police, you still have the same people there, the same training that they've had, and if certain things are not done properly in terms of that relations on the streets, it could inflame further passion. Can we get the change when they get back to the streets?
That is clear. There will be changes. But let me give you one background. You are not privy to some of the inner workings of the place. But I tell you that on a daily basis, on a regular basis, officers either in SARS, in operations, in administration, those on patrol on the beat, are being disciplined. Many are being reduced in rank, and some are being outrightly dismissed. But going forward, what I want to see is to see police officers on our streets connecting with the public, not just going on patrols, but having that connection with the public and bridging that gap. That means if I am on patrol, the patrol officer will stop to interact, to ask the situation around that environment, and find a means where that member of the public can reach them. Because that, if we don't close that gap, it is going to be a problem. And I would also recommend that perhaps it's time for the Nigeria Police Force to consider setting up professional standards units to monitor the conduct of officers. Monitoring units and all that, but we kind of have professional standards, and then having in that place monitoring and evaluation, empowering the Assistant Inspector General, the Zonal Assistant Inspector Generals of Police, giving them the resource to monitor activities within their zone. And then having the research and planning unit, or in the administration unit.
All right, we'll come back to this.
Professional standards.
Some just think that
what is important now is
some think this is papering over cracks. But don't worry, we'll still come back to you. But let me bring in Professor Adeniro on this one, because there are many who think that there's got to be a fundamental change to the structure of policing in this country. In fact, lately, that conversation popped up again about state police, to be or not to be for you.
Well, I believe one of the issues that really need to be addressed now is the need to activate this police community relations program to ensure that the people are carried along there. But more fundamentally, there is need to have a holistic approach at the structure of the police. We cannot leave the security of this country just to the police, the regular police. The number is limited, that's one. Of course, there is also need for increased professionalism, all those things. But meanwhile, the people also have to be carried along. In terms of community policing, which people have been advocating, I think this is within the framework of what I said earlier on. In other words, that we have to have a holistic approach. Let Mr. President, as part of the solutions to what we are trying to do, go back and take that 2014 confab recommendations and look at how this could be implemented. Those that can be implemented without really going through the legislature, those that need to go to the legislature, let it go there, because some of these issues are already addressed there. We cannot afford a nation that is not only under-policed, but is not mindful of the challenges that we are now facing, because we know the report of July 2020 is not just a flux, it is real. And we should not wait until we now have another firefighting approach. Yeah. We should look at it holistically and realize that indeed we have to look at this issue. And mind you, one other factor, one issue that really also has to be addressed, we shouldn't overlook, is the fact that something precipitated what we are now discussing. The youth leadership, resourceful as they are, as we have seen, should be brought in. Let the government sit with them, discuss with them their input beyond these inquiries that are set up, this commission of inquiries. Beyond that, they need to have some input into the unfolding resolution of the crisis, because they are part of the problem, they are also part of the solution. They did not create the problem, we created the problem for them. All right. But since they have appreciated the need to challenge, to solve, to liberate themselves, let them be part of that solution to the liberation.
Okay, well, we'll come back in a moment, and then we'll get our closing thoughts. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Prof, could you go ahead and, so moving forward now, what kind of steps should we be taking such that we are addressing this problem, at least fundamentally?
Yeah. Right, yeah. We should admit that we cannot be using the mindset of the 20th century to solve the problem of the 21st century. That is why I was saying that even the youth, the young ones, should be brought in to tap from their resourcefulness in terms of finding permanent solution to this. We have a system when we implement, let's say, community policing. We have a system in which the type of training that will be required, the structure that will enable that training to be given and so forth, we have really not looked into that. A lot is going on in the world out there that will require that we give in more to our police, incentives, training, and of course, the technology that will be required to properly police a population that is as expansive as we are in this country. And more importantly, it is also important that we factor in the community component of the policing system. You and I, and of course, various parents, individuals, and so on, and community development associations, different groups, we have to be involved in this. It isn't the man in uniform alone that will handle the challenges that we are facing right now. We need to address this issue. And of course, while we are also doing that, we have to be mindful that, look, no matter what we do, if we do not train those children, if we do not bring them up properly, we are wasting our time. It is that fundamental training, the basics upon which we are going to base whatever else we do. That is the people that will now be policed later on. In fact, they themselves will be part of the policing system without necessarily wearing the uniform, because they will have appreciated the values of living and the values of development and, of course, of nationhood.
Well, Prof, just one more thing on that one. You have, a few times you've talked about the youths. And you've referenced some past leaders that we have who, well, some of them still in leadership, who started as much younger people than they are now over the past 20 years. Now, how do you think we can begin to bring the young people in? Because you know as well as everyone does that they are in the majority as far as the voting population is concerned. Some of them feel that the political structure is skewed against them. How do we begin to engineer this system to factor them in, even from this very moment, constitution or no constitution?
Well, thank you very much. Our leadership recruitment process is very flawed. And some of what we have been doing over the years, people look at, instead of headhunting, there are two ways of looking at it. One is this headhunting, bringing the very bright and the brightest, and try to encourage them to play certain key roles and so forth. At the same time, there is a general one that no matter where you are going in the system, because you are going to function within the system anyway, you will have gone through some orientation that will make you function to defend the flag to the very end, to know that once you are defending the nation, you are defending yourself, and by defending yourself, that defense will mean equipping yourself with adequate knowledge, with the capacity to be able to perform in any society. That is part of it. There are certain institutions which exist now. Some were existing in the past. They phased them out, which will enable the individual to know what roles to play in the political process. I wonder sometimes what political parties are doing when they exist without a very functional institutes, which will enable them to take their
Prof,
members,
if you could respond to
those holding positions, those not holding positions.
If you could respond to this in about 60 seconds, so we can move to Mr. Analogu. Prof, just a minute, because
Yes.
if our leadership recruitment process is flawed, can we expect people
Yes.
who emerge from a flawed leadership recruitment process to do something about our poor education system, given how much we spend abroad for education?
Never. Never. You cannot put something on nothing. You cannot put something on nothing. That is why I keep talking about going back to the fundamentals. What we now have is that the pool, the army of the young that we have, the leaders have turned them to a resource from which they recruit people as part of those to be used as the election rigging machine. And of course, because these people also do not know that they are mortgaging their own future, that they are destroying their own future, that they are destroying their own careers, and of course, making sure that the system replicates itself.
All right.
Giving us that flawed system, unless and until it is changed fundamentally. And it can only be changed through two ways. One, I have mentioned this structural rearrangement in such a way that we micromanage some of these things. Then the second one, of course, is that at the national level, there have to be leadership reorientation. The ideological issue cannot be run away from. We cannot run away from it. And when those people to give it do not even have it, it means that we have a fundamental problem, which will have to be revisited. And this is calling upon those people who are worried, who are concerned,
to
go
Prof.
beyond what the ethnic, attractions, religious, appeals, and all that, and so forth, and focus on the ideological. That would serve as the key to open up the gate
Mr.
to
Naligu,
reposition in this country and to moving us forward.
All right, Prof. Mr. Naligu, we, unfortunately, police stations were raised, police officers were caught in the fray, with armory looted, but we also have heard, reported out there as well, the directives from the presidents to do something about the salary structure or scale of police officers in the country. What kind of impact is that going to have? Will it change anything in terms of the conduct of policemen? Because when you speak about that change, we also have to put into consideration the fact that many of those in police today were those who came through politicians, those recommendations. So what kind of change can we really get?
Thank you very much. I want to start my remark by saying that the police is a very essential institution in any country. The welfare of the police has a significant role even in their service delivery. Somebody should be well remunerated so that he knows that if I lose this job, I've lost so much. And I believe very strongly that if we equip our police force, if we take care of their welfare, it's going to impact directly, and especially their training. Good salary, good welfare, especially training. I just make this passionate appeal. Let our training institutions be taken care of.
All right.
Because a man that is properly trained, a man that is properly given the proper good welfare, has no choice but to perform.
All right, Mr. Naligu,
Let me
now,
give you
pardon me, on that direct, okay, go ahead with the example. But briefly, please, so we can wind down.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to ask that the directive that the IGP gave, the directive that the IGP gave about withdrawing police officers or police personnel from VIPs, it's not the first. We know the former IGP, even previous ones, have said the same thing. But fundamental to that is that, look, the service they provide for those VIPs are paid for. So that's always a challenge, because how are they going to, is that even going to work in the first place?
I spoke at a forum, and I said that that directive is very timely and must be enforced. I think what we need to do, I'm happy that the new Police Act made provision for private investigators. In that, going forward on that, I want to also align myself with the position that we should look at some of our private security companies. Look at 1, 2, 3 and empower them so that those who feel they need to be, they need extra protection, that the general security is not enough, might be they can avail themselves of such service so that these officers who are withdrawn will increase the manpower resource of the Nigeria Police Force.
All right.
Yes, there are those that are entitled, that they can be kept. But I think the directive that the IG gave, I will align with him and urge the management team to also see that this directive is complied with. The situation.
Well, the thing is,
from what my observation, from what is going on.
Yeah. Okay. Just conclude on that, then we'll just go on.
From what is going on, the police management team doesn't just have any choice.
Okay.
But to ensure that they draw personnel and have a critical mass that can address some of these concerns.
All right, Mr. Nalego, but you know, so the immediate concerns will be, if it worked before, why did they have to issue the directive again? Food for thought. But we thank you very much indeed, retired AIG Wilson Inalegu, as well as Professor Tunde Adeniro OFR, former Minister of Education and former ambassador to Germany. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on today.
Thank you.
All right, then now the announcement yesterday by the president reappointing the INEC chairman for a second 5-year term. Did say got many saying, well, he's broken the jinx, the 22-year jinx of getting a second term. But what does that mean in the scheme of things? What should we expect from the INEC chairman or INEC, or the National Assembly at that, even the president? How about us, the electorate, moving forward? So we've got Mr. Fred Nzako here with us. He's a legal practitioner. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Well, that announcement certainly makes feelings about it in terms of what does that mean moving forward. So for you, how did you internalize that announcement?
For me, I saw it coming. I wasn't surprised. Yes, I saw it coming.
Well, he's done so well?
Well, I saw it coming. I wasn't surprised because, one, Mr. President has this knack for not wanting to drop anybody. I mean, that is his person, for reasons I don't know why. And the two, once it comes to politics, it's neither yes nor no. It's neither here nor there. It's either one is benefiting and the other is crying, or one is crying and the other is benefiting. And once it's politics, there is no direct course. There is no direct route to it. Some people will say Professor Mahmoud is the best INEC chairman because his tenure was a kind of benefit to them. Some will tell you that he's the worst INEC chairman because he is never consistent with his policies and programs as chairman of INEC, as leader of the electoral empire.
But what would you tell us?
Well, I will tell you what I feel, and what I feel is that he has a lot of responsibilities on his shoulders going forward. What I tell you is futuristic. Going in the past, I'll tell you what others feel, and then I'll tell you what I feel going forward, because he having been, if he is reconfirmed, which I feel this Senate that we have will just reconfirm him. I have no doubt about that. When he is reconfirmed, he should know that there is a historical trajectory that we have noticed with INEC headship. In the first tenure, they will want to satisfy their appointer. In the second tenure, they will want to satisfy the nation. And in the first tenure of Mahmoud Jaga, Mahmoud Yakubu, so many people felt he tried to satisfy his appointer. Going by all the things we saw in build up to 2019 general elections, especially the presidential election and then the aftermath. And now that he's going for a second term, which he would most likely get, he will now have an opportunity to serve the country. And what do I mean? Because it is the only opportunity he has to write his name on gold. If he fails, he will go down in infamy as being one of, history will not be kind to him. Today, Professor Jega is moving around the whole world as a good citizen. as one who has helped to deepen the democracy of Nigeria. And that's a very big plus for him. If he did not handle the 2015 election, at least to the perception of many, as being good enough, he wouldn't have that strength, that moral strength to move around, and nobody will give him such honor and accolade as he's enjoying today. Professor Mahmoud, if he does not get this appointment, this reappointment, his output in 2019 was not good enough. But we now found out that after 2019, after the Kogi election, he seems to be improving. The INEC under him seems to be improving, especially with the Edo election, with the Ondo election, and we expect that if he was learning the ropes in the past 5 years, he cannot claim to be learning the ropes in the next 5 years.
So what do we expect from him?
We expect a better INEC chairman. We expect a better INEC under him. We expect a better electoral process, a better output in election, and the major challenges are coming. There will be by-elections in a few states across the country. There will be a seemingly major election in Anambra State next year, and there will be a major, the huge election in 2023.
But this same INEC hasn't been firing on all salvo. You may want to agree with that or disagree. For instance, when it comes to managing the entire process, INEC is not particularly firing on all salvo. Some expect that INEC should be monitoring the political parties, which a number of people say they are not doing effectively well enough, monitoring their finances, they are not doing that well enough, prosecuting electoral offenses, part of their functions, they are not doing that well enough, as some people, might want to say. But in electioneering is what you're talking about, that the election process itself is what INEC is improving on. If that's the only thing, perhaps we would be satisfied. But then we still have cases where pre-election matters affect post-election results.
Absolutely.
And in this same election, and it's still under the same INEC chairman. So again, to Chamberlain's question, what are we to expect if the law remains the same and this improvement is experienced?
Well, don't forget there are three major stakeholders in any electoral process: the voters, the umpire, and the security agencies. There are also responsibilities that INEC is supposed to carry out, and some of those responsibilities are already coded in our laws under the Electoral Act and then other laws establishing INEC. You alluded to the fact that there are some other responsibilities that INEC is expected to be carrying out, i.e. managing the political parties, inspecting them, ensuring that there is probity, ensuring that pre-election matters do not affect the post-election matters. But those are essentially the issues that the political parties themselves will have to do. There must be some form of division of labor. Much as I'm not holding brief for INEC because they are the major.
Some would argue that right now you are holding brief for INEC because
I'm not holding brief for INEC.
Pardon me, you know that it's the law that empowers INEC to do these things.
It is the law.
You don't expect, if everyone was going to obey the law, there will be no need for the police.
INEC has for a long time argued that we set up electoral offences court, for example, that will try electoral offenders.
Is that an admittance on the part of INEC?
It is an admittance on their part that they need more cooperation from the judiciary. That they need more cooperation from the judicial arm of government to ensure that when matters are taken to court on account of electoral offences, that most matters are given expeditious trial. But you find out that politicians themselves who benefit from electoral misfortunes of citizens from such act that would have taken them to court will now either subterraneously scuttle the process of trial or ensure that those people don't get punished adequately. So,
are you suggesting
yes.
that there are defective structures in the system that are supporting or not encouraging INEC to perform all of its statutory functions?
So many defective functions. Yes, they are. But one can say that those functions are functions that INEC itself should be able to pull through and ensure that they work properly. But when it comes to issue of justice and adjudication, INEC has nothing to do there, because theirs is to lay the problem bare and then expect those who are in authority to take it up from there.
That's not what the police is saying. The police is saying that our job is to investigate and hand the case files to INEC.
INEC's job is to take the case file to the court. Not to prosecute. To prosecute, of course. To take the case file to the court.
But how effectively has INEC
that is the judiciary that is left to handle that. It's judiciary.
Is it the judiciary that is supposed to provide the lawyers?
It is the legislature that's supposed to provide the law. The judiciary should now interpret it.
Is it the judiciary that's supposed to provide the lawyers that INEC would use to prosecute?
It is INEC that should provide the lawyers. But when INEC is now crying that they don't have enough, what do? Will you continue to spend the entire money on INEC?
So back to the question that I asked the other time, is it then an admittance on the part of INEC that they are incapable of doing all that the law requires them to do?
INEC cannot admit that they are incapable. Of course, you and I know that they will never admit.
So why then are they asking for an Electoral Offences Commission?
They are asking for Electoral Offences Commission because they have been crying that even the ones they have taken to court have not received proper judicial pronouncement because of the delays associated with it, occasioned by the cog being put in the wheel of progress by politicians that are beyond their control. So it is a society.
Does that mean that those politicians are, flouting the law? They are contravening the laws, and no one can hold them?
The right word is that they are subjugating the laws. That's the right word. They may not be flouting it openly, but they are undermining the legal process. They are undermining the judicial process. And I can tell you that many politicians undermine the judicial process. Who arms the thugs, for example? Is it INEC? Who arms them? Who causes the problems during elections? When you go for primary election, who arms the thugs and who causes problems? But virtually every political party virtually no political party that is immune from such accusation. Who handles the issue of sanity at campaign rallies? Yes, INEC is supposed to look into all that, but the system itself must begin to churn out legitimate people who want things to work well.
What should we expect from National Assembly?
We should expect National Assembly to look into the pedigree of INEC under the current chairman, who is standing reappointment, and then give him support.
What about the Electoral Act?
Support. Give him support in the sense that it seems to me that he has come out from the process of learning. The tutelage, he has overcome that. It seems to me that he is making progress, and he is now on the threshold of history. If he doesn't do well for life.
What do you mean specifically? What support?
What support he needs is to be reappointed. Of course.
So what happens to the Electoral Act? Everybody wants something to be done about that.
Everybody wants something to be done about the Electoral Act. It is the duty of the legislature to do something about the Electoral Act. And then it is expected that INEC should now make their presentation in any aspect and any area where they are having challenges. They will now come and present what they want. The legislature should now look into it, and then most importantly, for the president to even sign the act itself, because even the last amendment of the Electoral Act was declined assent by Mr. President. Okay. So that is a major challenge. It is not the INEC that will do that. It is the legislature that will ensure that the last Electoral Act, even if it means to tweak it and then bring it back to Mr. President for assent, so that INEC will now perform to its best optimal capacity.
Maybe that is the support that everybody wants to see, the Electoral Act changing above all else. Well, thank you for coming on. Always a pleasure. Mr. Fred Nzako, a legal practitioner. But before we run away on that one, let's take a look at some of the emails coming through from you about what you have heard in the last 2 hours or thereabout. Oshinoa Kingsley says, SARS isn't the main problem, but a product of the rottenness in MPF, which is likewise the result of unattended inequalities and injustices in our foundation. That's Oshinoa Kingsley.
Well, this one is from Barrister George Akpangbo. He says it's very obvious that government is insincere with the issues and demands of the youths regarding SARS. It was saying that Mr. Wilson, that's one of our guests, is not straight with his response, and that is a clear indication that nobody is in charge of the police establishment. Our people are tired and fed up with what is happening in the country, and the politicians are still busy playing politics. The present and future belong to the youth, and they have spoken out loud and clear. With what we have seen around the country, it is very clear that Nigeria is a poor nation that cannot feed her citizens. We should all try and take responsibility for our actions in Nigeria for once.
How about this one from Benga, who says, I know of countries that thought they had nothing until they lost it all to violent protests. Syria, Libya, Liberia, Iraq, etc. Both government of Nigeria and the citizens need to tread cautiously here.
Dio says, please, how do we explain these policies reaching foreign shores? Trust me, this has not been photoshopped. Seems these leaders are not saying the truth. I wonder why.
Well, Charles says, I don't think anything has really changed about the police. This isn't right. Moving forward, the police should have a town hall meeting with their immediate community to assure them of their confidence coming back to our roads. People need to heal.
And Felix says, it would seem like your discussion on police reform is one-sided. How do we shield the police from being corrupt by the society? How we shield the police from being corrupted by the society should be an integral part of the reform. It is the inducement from the society that derails SARS operatives from their main functions. Oh, wow.
Really? Okay. All right. Anyway, well, thank you all for your comments. So please keep them coming through. Well, that is the show today. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
And I'm Ayo Makide. Please stay safe out there. Have a good day.